Hey everybody, welcome to the video. This is going to be for our final assignment in Wick editor for both TGJ 201 and TGJ 401. So we're going to share this video between both of you. The last 2 weeks you guys have worked on some squash and stretch animations, which was using, you did like a hand-drawn squash and stretch, which was a frame to frame. Last week we learned about tweening, which is about using keyframes to have the computer kind of interpolate where the movement would be, save you maybe some work, but it may have been actually a little bit more complicated of a video because it had more steps, where it had more total frames, etc. Today, what you guys are going to start on, you're going to create something that uses a little bit of a little bit of frame by frame and a little bit of tweening. So you're going to have to integrate both of them. This is kind of like your culminating activity, shows that you understand both concepts, and we're going to do something that's going to help you utilize them both in this. So I'm just going to pop over to our screen of the assignment, and I'm going to just walk you through as we get ready to roll. There we go. I'll make that a little bigger for everybody. And if you have any questions, of course, ask in the chat and we'll help you out. So, as I said, you're going to create an animation that features both tweening, which is pose-to-pose animation, and frame-to-frame animation in the same screen. So, you're going to be creating an 84-frame animation. So, in 84 frames, we're still using 12 frames per second. So, that means 12 times 7 equals 84. So, in your animation, it's going to have three kind of pieces that are interacting together. The first part is that you're going to have three candles that are going to kind of have a flickering flame. You're going to create those candles using frame by frame animation. We talked about when we were looking at our principles of animation, how this creates a little bit more of a natural movement. If you can imagine a flickering flame, it's not going to be a very robotic kind of animation or very direct. It always is kind of dancing and unpredictable. So that's what you're going to use for the flames flickering, and we're going to walk through. I'm going to show you how I'm going to get started, and you can use that as a basis. Then you're going to have at the beginning of your animation on the left hand side a ball that's going to roll up a ramp that you're going to create, and the ball itself is going to jump over the flames, and then it's going to come down and fall into a pool of water as if we're at a circus or something, and you're going to make a bit of a splash. So the ball itself rolling up, very similar to what you did last week, is going to have tweens and keyframes in order to get the ball where it needs to be. And then when it actually splashes into the water pool, you're going to probably use frame by frame animation to add a little bit of a splash and flourish at the end of it. There's a little bit different as far as the setup of how I would like this animation. The last few weeks we've been using the 480 kind of default that they have there. We're going to be using this one using the 720p option. So remember, when you go up to the gear icon on the top right, you'll actually be able to choose, it'll say standard, square, 720, or 1080. I would like you to choose the 720p option. And as you'll see when we go to show our my screen, it means that it's going to be a wider frame, because obviously we are having this ramp, these candles, and this pool on the other side. We need to see all of these come through. You also need to, once you are setting up your options at the beginning, name your project with your last name. So it'll say Dunphy space dash space final animation, or whatever your last name is, and then you'll hit apply. You have to hit the X to get out of that quick little menu option as you go through. The other steps that we're going to talk about, please make sure again that your animation steps are on different layers. So you're going to have a layer for your candlesticks, a layer for the orange flame, a layer for the blue flame that's going to be inside the orange flame, and we'll show you that. You're going to have a layer for your ramp, a layer for your pool, and then another layer for your actual ball. And I want you guys to be creative with this one. If you want to add a unique background, if you want to use a different object instead of a plain ball, if you want to bring in a circle logo and have that do it, if you want to bring in a Jigglypuff or a basketball, I don't care, that's fine. As long as it's appropriate for something that my son could see if he was marking with me. Whatever you find, as long as it is a roundish type object that can utilize a bit of a squash and stretch as it goes through the air, That's what I want to be able to see. And then finally, of course, I want your object to enter from the left of the screen, roll up the ramp, clear the flames, and land in the pool on the right-hand side. So I'm going to jump out of that. And again, I'm going to share this document. The tutorial that I'm going to do right now, that I'm going to follow through it, I'm going to show you my steps of how I would create it. I will export that as a GIF, or at least the beginnings of it, and I will embed it into this note, and then I will put this note assignment up on Edmodo for you to constantly reference, as well as the link to this Zoom that we're recording right now. So I'm just going to stop that. I think I've got some people that need to get let in. There we go. Darian was a late joiner. Okay, so now we're going to jump over to my Wick screen. Any other questions before I get moving on that? Okay. So right now what I did really quickly was I laid out very, very roughly what the actual frame kind of is going to look like. So you can see this is the 720p frame. So we have a ramp. These are the candlesticks, and we're going to draw flames here. And then you have a pool on this side. I've used two shapes. I used a square to create the sides of it, and then I took a rectangle and put over top of the pool at that point. And then you're going to have, of course, the ball. So your ball will start here, roll up, and maintain that. You may have to change the size of the launch angle of your ramp, depending on how you do this. Or you might just move these objects over. So I might move my candle a little bit further so that it seems a little bit more natural as we go through. So I'm going to turn that layer off completely, and I'm going to start this from scratch. So the same thing, while you're working on yours, you're welcome to simply follow this Zoom step by step so you get the idea. If you feel that you're really comfortable with the program and you want to just kind of give it a go and see where you get, by all means, go ahead. You don't need to follow mine step by step, but my finished product should look pretty close to your finished product as far as the requirements that I put on the assignment. So my first one that I'm going to create is I'm going to start with my candlesticks. So as I said before, you need to always label your layers. So I'm double clicking here, over here, and I'm going to call this my candlesticks. And on this candlestick layer, this is just the actual stick. The flame on top is going to be animated, but the candlestick is not moving at all. So when I create this candlestick, it can stay exactly the same spot. It's not going to have to change. So I'm going to make my first frame. I'm going to drag this all the way over because I said it needs to be on the screen for 84 frames, which is 7 seconds, right? And using our 12 frame per second math. I'm going to push this all the way to 84. There we go. So now when I create my first image here of my, my candlestick, because I'm not going to animate it or add any keyframes or anything different in between, it's going to stay on the screen for the entire time to the object. So I'm going to use my rectangle. I'm going to make the actual candlesticks. Let's pick it a different color. We want to have contrast with the orange and blue kind of flame. So I'm actually going to make it a a green candlestick. I'm going to make it like a darker green. And I'm going to make my first candlestick about yay big. Now, I want these to be, I want 3 candlesticks for you to have to jump over. So I'm going to create this one, and I'm just going to go copy, Command C, hit Command V, and it will paste a duplicate. So it could be a little bit further. And then I'll paste a third one, paste it over here as well. And I'm actually going to move them over just a little bit more. And to create a kind of unique look, I'm going to actually have this one be a little higher and this one be a little lower, right? Because when you have a candle burning, they don't all burn absolutely evenly as they move through. Just going to move this one over a few frames. Great. Now, as you can see, if I scroll this, they're not moving at all. So nothing of this part is going to change. Now, the next layer is I'm going to start to add my flames. So I'm going to click and add a new layer. This layer I want to be underneath the candlesticks, and you're going to see why in a second. So we're going to start all the way back to frame 1. I need to make sure I'm clicked on this layer. And I'm going to add a frame now. I need to add a frame because this is going to be an actual animation. It's going to change all the time. Now this is what's going to be long. You're going to have to hand draw these for 84 frames. It's going to take a long time, but not a ridiculous amount of long time, but you'll see what it has to do. So I'm going to click this frame number 1, click on it down here, and I'm going to use now my brush tool. So I'm going to change my brush, and I'm going to choose the orange. I'm going to go over to this actual swatch so that it's easy to pick and it'll stay exactly the same. I'm going to pick my orange swatch here. And I'm going to move, whoops, I'm going to click in a bit more so I can see a little bit more about what I'm doing. As far as my brush size, I'm going to choose a little bit smaller brush size because it's going to allow me to kind of control it a bit more. I'm going to choose a size 7 brush size, and I'm going to start right here on the first candle. Now, when I draw a flame, it's going to look kind of something maybe like this, right? That's not the cleanest one. You'll see. Not too bad. I'm going to eventually use a little fill on that one to make it a little better. I might even change my size. So there's one. This one, again, is going to look a little different, right? We want them all to kind of look and sway a little different. Now, remember where I said how I want to layer mine so that the candlesticks is above the flame? This is why, is so that when I click it, if it draws over the top, it hides it behind it. So it flattens it out on that particular style. So before I move any further, I'm actually going to label this. I'm going to label this orange flame. Now, when I go to my second frame, right now there's nothing there. So I have to add a new frame. And I'm going to turn on my onion skinning. We've talked about onion skinning allowing you to see the frame that is before it or the frame that's after it. You can change how far your onion skinning goes by dragging this kind of reddish toolbar over the top. So I'm going to say, great, that's where I want it. So I'm going to look back to my orange. And I'm going to say the next one is going to be just slightly different. Right? This one gets a little skinnier. When flames are flickering, they're always kind of changing. So you get to kind of really do this in a bunch of different ways. So I'm going between frame 1 and frame 2. And what I'm going to do with each of these frames, and I would recommend you maybe do this at the end after you've drawn them all in. Now I'm going to click on this frame, go to my fill bucket. I've got my same orange color, and I can fill in this flame on each one. So I go through frame 1, jump over to frame 2, fill them all in. So now when I play it, it's going to start to kind of move that little bit. So we're going to do about 6 or 7 frames before I play it back so that you can kind of see how it's working. So go to frame 3, add frame as we have to do each time, take my brush, and again, this is going to create that kind of fluid, natural way of doing it is this frame by frame type of animation, right? You've got to remember, you can't make your flame too high because the ball has to clear it, right? So you have to kind of think, all right, if I'm doing my ball, the keyframes are going to probably be up here, here, here as it rolls back down, here, here to splash into the actual pool that we're going to draw a little bit later. So there's frame 3. Again, each time, add the frame so that it's clear. Right? If one was kind of fat before, make it a little skinnier. One was skinnier, make it a little fatter. If it was always pointing to the right, maybe kind of have it curve a little bit more to the left. And again, if you don't like something that you did, don't forget to just use the eraser button. Click on my eraser tool, I can say, oh, that's a little too extreme the way it's moving over. I'm going to curve that up a little bit like that. Then you can come back to your brush tool again and figure out how you want to do it. Frame 4, we're on frame 5. And you don't have to be super clean with this, right? As you're drawing these, it's going to look a little messy and unnatural as we move through. Right? If you want to, you know, turn on a candle at your house carefully without burning your house down to kind of see how this looks, give that a go, right? You might do something with your candle that looks a little bit more natural than mine. It's up to you. Okay, so I've done all those frames. Now I'm going to go back and we're going to do the fill frames, right? So I'm going to go back to my fill bucket, fill each one in. Depending on what you have running on your computer, it'll be a little quicker or a little slower, but it's not too bad. Once you kind of twist over, if you loop across your loops, you'll see that you kind of end up doing stuff like that, where it might be better for you to just go and draw it with your brush to fill that in if you're having issues. You can see here where it crossed, I have to redo inside that spot as well, right? So right now you're gonna say, oh, it's a kind of ugly looking candle. Here's where that next step that we're gonna add that's gonna make it look just a little bit neater. So we're gonna add another layer, and we're gonna call this blue flame. If you ever watch a candle, you notice the inside of the flame, the very center of the flame has a blue flame, which is where the fire is the hottest. And so we're going to basically do a blue flame, over the top, and it's going to be a smaller flame, and it's going to flicker a little bit different in there. So we're going to click now, and I'm going to change my fill color. I'm going to pick a light blue kind of flame, something like this, maybe. And I'm actually going to change the size of my brush. I think 7 is a little tight. I'm going to go down to about 5. And now I'm back on this first flame. And you're going to notice I'm going to add the frame so that we're ready to go. But I need to have this frame, just like if you think about Photoshop, it has to be above the orange flame or else we're not going to see it. So we're putting it over. And I'm going to take my little brush, and I'm just going to draw something like this. Basically a smaller version and a simpler version of what you've already done. Take my fill. And that's what we're going to be kind of creating. You can see I missed a little spot there, so it might be easier to just jump over to my brush and just color that piece in, right? So if I had moved this below, remember, if I had dragged this and I didn't move that below, you would have a tougher time seeing it. It wouldn't be consistent. So you need to have it above what we're going to do. So I'm going to follow the same process that I did before. Add a new frame. There was my onions skinning from my previous blue one. Again, like I said, it's much easier for you to come back afterwards, I think, and refill than it is to try and change your key, keep changing your tool over and over and over. Doesn't seem like the most efficient way to do it. You can see here, I've got too many frames afterwards. It's making it a little bit difficult to see because of all those keyframes. I can drag this onion skin thing in so that it only shows the frame before, the frame after, or something like that, instead of having 6 frames all the way across. Again, you can always use your undo tools if something gets caught a little bit or you don't like the look of something. Do this last frame. You can see I can be a little ugly and let it overrule that one because I know it's going to get cut off by the actual candlestick. So just like we did before, take my fill bucket, go backwards and fill these in. My computer's in need of a little restart. This is also what happens when your wife's watching an Amazon Prime video upstairs on my not so amazing Wi-Fi network. So as you can see, there's also a good reason why I only did 7 frames. You're obviously going to do much more. Almost there, and then we can see a little looping action. There we go. Celebrate good times. All right. So you can see now this has the onion skinning on. I can always turn that onion skin off and see how it works. Some of these little orange pieces in between, if I was going to be picky, I might go back, like I said, with my brush, look on there, and just kind of color it in so it matches up. But truthfully, having a little tiny flicker of orange in there almost seems kind of more natural anyways. So now I've got those 3 different layers together, orange flame, blue flame, candlesticks, but to a viewer eye, you don't really realize what's going on. I'm just going to hit play, and it creates that kind of flickering flame, right? You can see it. So now my next step would be I need to create the ramp, and I need to create the pool. Once it's important for me to do those first because to keyframe in between the ball, I need to know where the actual, where it's ending up, where it's starting, and where it has to get over. So this is why I did the candle flames first to kind of give me an idea of where it's going to go. So we're going to go back down here, create a new frame. We're going to call this the ramp. Now, a couple different ways that you could do the ramp. One easy way that I found was I just sat and drew a big rectangle here. Doesn't have to be blue. It can be whatever color you want. And then I took the eraser brush and I just chose a really big version of the eraser. Excuse me, of the eraser. So I kind of did this and then just did a nice smooth kind of cut like that. Said, all right, let's trim that a little bit more. Right now, I think I went a little too far, so I might back it up. There we go. So now if I look at this trajectory, it feels like it's going to go too high, right? So I need to kind of create more of a lift off here as it comes up. So this ramp is going to stay the entire time. So again, I don't need to do any animating of my actual ramp. The only thing I have to do is make sure that the frames extend all the way out to 84, because that's how long it's going to go. right? So that at the end, we'll be there. Now we could jump ahead and I could draw, you know, on this frame here, I could jump and make an orange flame at some point just to give you a reference point of where everything is kind of ending up to you. Just make sure that when you're creating it, it's on the right layer. Okay, so now the next thing I have to create after the ramp, another layer altogether for my, I'm going to call this pool. Bit of a kiddie pool. The way that I created this was I took a rectangle. We're going to make a completely different color. Let's choose yellow. So I made a big yellow rectangle for this. Then I'm going to go over to my ellipse tool, and it's going to be water, right? So I'm going to choose blue, dark blue. I would say, again, recommend use the dark blue for the water and use that slightly lighter tint for your flame or your ramp. But once I'm over here, click, drag, and create that kind of shape. And now I want to just adjust it that little bit. Right? And it gives us the idea, that little, you know, again, we're not making a perfect animation here. We're more worried about the understanding of the frame by frame and the arcs and your timing than we are about your technical skill as a modeler. You can always click on it and use the arrow keys. And you'll see, what did I do? I did this on the last frame because that's where I was when I had jumped ahead. So now I can take this frame, drag it all the way back to frame number 1 so that that pool is there the entire time. Now, one thing that you could do as you get to some of these flames, you could copy and paste some of these down the line. You've created some of this work. You could take this and move it. So let's say you really don't like drawing it. I could take my cursor, and you'll see here if I select, it's going to select both the blue flame and the orange. If I hit copy and I jump ahead to, say, frame number, whatever I have over here, issue would be that I'm not sure if it's going to let me do that or not. If I was just copying, let's say, the orange, and then I clicked onto my orange flame, I could create a new frame right there and paste it, and that would be in there as I move around. But you don't have to do that. You can mess around with that if you're trying to save yourself a few frames. The problem right now is you can see this blue flame and this orange flame got dragged out. So that's why it's giving me issues saying, what's going on here, right? This part we don't need. That keyframe needs to move back. That's why. So now over here, we'll see nothing eventually. But sorry, that's on the blue flame, and I'm on the orange one. So I've got this. I've got this. My last object that I need to add is my ball. So I'm going to go layer 7, ball, and we're going to make a red ball just to have a nice contrast to everything. And we're going to do it again, frame number 1. Over here, and we're going to create this one as a tween. So I can click right here to create my tween, drag it out, and I'm going to say how long is this going to take? I'm going to count and kind of make this imaginary, like time it out in my head. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. So at about 5 seconds, I want the ball to impact that water. 5 seconds means 5 times 12 is 60. So that means that this tween needs to extend out all the way to frame 60. The ball at that point is disappearing into the water. We're going to have some splash on the last few frames, and then you have a few extra frames at the end to deal with. So if this is where my final tween is going to go, great. Move all the way back, and I'm going to draw my ball. So I take my ellipse, hold shift so that I get a nice perfect circle as to what I'm doing there. And I'm going to start it off the screen, right? We like to see kind of what the screen is before it all starts. So I'm going to make that frame 1. Frame 60, where I'm way over here, that frame is going to be there. But we're going to put it kind of behind the blue, right? So it's going to have to change the order here a little bit. We're going to put that above the pool, right? And you might have to erase some of these frames on your image as it gets here. It's up to you how you're going to make it disappear when you get to the end. So if that's that frame, halfway through, frame 60, I know I'm going to want it to be reaching up at the top. So I'm going to make a new tween, and it's going to be up here is kind of that peak apex. Remember, it's probably going to be a little slower getting up into the air as it kind of rolls up versus how fast it's going to splash down. So I would actually probably move that frame over to about 35, so it's a little bit heavier. Now, right now, it's going to be very, well, frame 1 needs to be down there, right? So right now, it's just going to do this very direct spot. It looks like I added a keyframe somewhere wrong in there. No, that's fine. This one needs to be back over here. There we go. Right, so right now, just looking at the timing, we're not making that kind of ping pong kind of attack as what we're doing. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the end. I always like to think of for me, the end first, where it's getting to. So if I'm going to make this frame here, instead of having it right there, I'm going to have it a little further because I know there's going to be a bit more of an arc to it, right? And as it's coming down from above here, if I go back about 4 frames, instead of it having this direct line, it's going to be a little bit more straight. So I'm going to add a new tween frame, lift it up, right? So that it's coming down further. So again, same thing, working in between those keyframes. I know if this is the first one, a little bit further is going to be a bit more of an arc. So I'm going to have it right so that it starts to reach that peak. Might even be a little bit more. Maybe I make that original peak a little bit further, and I make this frame a little bit further so that it can start to fall down naturally. Again, as I move it a little bit further, I need to create more momentum. Add another tween, push it a little further. Same thing, a little further, add another tween a few seconds later. And now we're getting a more rounded arc, which is one of our principles of animation that we talked about so heavily, right? As it's moving a little closer here, I can realize, hey, it should probably be moving a little faster. So if I'm here, this frame here is going to be down and a little bit further, right? So that it picks up an impact. And maybe I need to roll this final frame back. Maybe where this frame was, this last one, maybe it has to be pushed back a little bit. Again, you're going to always experiment with your timing as you go through and learn a bit more. It takes time to understand your timing. No pun intended. Right, so you can see it kind of crashing down, and you have to decide, how am I going to make this, that frame right there that I had, maybe I don't want to use that frame anymore. Maybe I delete that keyframe and just put this final ball into there. So the same thing you're going to have to do is building it up on this side. This one will be a little different. You have to make sure that it's exant because it's following this ramp, right? As it gets to over here, a couple frames in, creating my ramp or my keyframe, it needs to be along here, right? So that it comes up this way. So a couple more frames in, and I need to keep adding keyframes to make sure that it follows it, right? You want to make sure that it's not ever, if you have a frame where it's like this and it's off there before it's reached the end, that's no good. It's not going to look natural. So as it moves over these little steps, keyframe, keyframe, right? Go back and just double check that it feels like it's rolling up. And here I need to start kind of arching that lift off a little bit more. So I'm going to use my mouse and actually use the arrow pad keys to make sure it gets up. Same thing, if I go 2 frames later and add a new tween, I want that feel like it has that arching spot here as it goes up. So if I get up to here where that top frame was, right? Then I have to start to go backwards and say, okay, well, this I need to have maybe a little bit further over so that when it comes up, maybe I'll take that frame and actually punch it as high as I can just to give it a little bit more arc. And decide how you want to do it. If you find that yours is coming just a little too close to some of these frames, well, then maybe you have to adjust some of your candle keyframes as well. I had another frame there so that it's not hitting those, and add that frame up there. The other option, again, entirely up to you. You might decide that, hey, I'm going to lay the, I'm going to do the ball first. And if you have the entire arc to the ball, then you could add the candles in, and for sure you're not going to get caught on something. So now if I hit play, right? Obviously, I have a lot of tweaking that I need to do in order to make the have some squash to those, to make sure that the speed is correct, right? So that it's moving fast enough as it gets up there, and you have to decide how it's going to come down. As it comes down, I might take another frame altogether, and that's where I might draw some of the blue splashes. So if I'm taking my blue splash, take a blue pen, blue brush, right? There's a frame. The next frame. So this one you would kind of do frame by frame, right? Something like this is going to move quite quick. You can have another frame. If you go back here, we'll have one pushing out this way. Who knows? You could get really, really tricky. Have this flame knock out this, this water knock out the flame, right? So you'll have it kind of impact as it hits here. So as it's hitting this water, I'm going to say that roughly this is the water frame. So if I go back to the ball, I'm going to actually erase this frame. So I'm going to make a keyframe, tween right there. I'm going to take my eraser, and I'm going to start to just underline. Well, is it going to let me do that on the ball? I think I might have to click on the ball. Let's see if it'll let me do it. Not sure if it'll let you erase the ball. The other odd thing that you could do then instead, there's always tricks away around problems when you run into them like this. And again, this is a new program to myself as well, is you can create a whole other layer. Go down here, create a new layer, and we're going to put it above the ball, and we're going to call it, and we're just going to make it like a blue rectangle. So I'm going to just go like this, and I'm going to put it down here, squeeze it in a little. Right? And now as it's hitting, you're going to have that layer zoomed out. And because it's ahead of it, it's going to hide underneath there. You can also put the pool then would have to be above that as well. So playing with your layers allows that to go through. But the issue is that on the pool, I created the circle on the same layer. Maybe you might make the layer to the pool a little bit different and add it to there. Okay. So I'm going to take this video and I'm going to share it, upload it. Once I link it, I will put it on the form. You can see again, just that rough idea. Ball goes up, splashes in, and you're going to create those as they go through. You're going to make it look much better than mine. You might want to use some type of background. We talked about how to import an asset and put that through. You could get as detailed as you want to. You could take these candles and you could take a brush, choose the green, and draw, you know, little kind of, so it looks like there's wax drippings kind of on it or something, depending on how much detail you want to do, right? If I draw one here. Right, just that little bit of detail, add something different to it as you put through. That's up to you on how far you want to take it. Today is June 9th that I'm looking at. You guys have until Saturday, June 20th in order to complete this. Okay, so my turn-in bins will be set for Saturday, June 20th. I have to hand in your report card marks on the Monday that day, so this gives me a day and a half to mark them all out and make sure that we're through. When you're finished, just like you did with your ping pong, you are going to save it and as a .wic file, right? So it'll bring up and say where we want to save this. Any second now. There we go. Save it as your .wic file. And again, it already has your name there, so it should say when you save it, please save it as last name, space dash space, final animation, and you're good to go. All right. Just gonna hit save on that. We're not gonna save that to robotics. Great. Any last questions before I let you free for your day? I will put that, like I said, you'll see on Edmodo before the end of the day. You'll have your Google Doc that'll say final animation, and at the bottom of this, I will put, here is the Zoom linked with the tutorial done by Mr. Dunphy, and I'll also put in the GIF, the rough GIF of what we just completed, so you can always kind of look at it and get an idea. And again, yours is going to be better than mine. You're expected to do, 3 hours of work a week, so even if you take 2 hours, that's much longer than the 45 minutes or less that I've taken right now to piece that all together. So should be great. Okay, if you're free, last second for any chance questions. No, as I said, we will not have a Zoom next week. You're going to get this week plus more week that time in order to complete yours. But by all means, if you have any questions, please hit me up in Edmodo. Send me an email on Outlook. Anything that I can do to help you get this nice final mark, cushioning up your mark before we go into the summer. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time this semester. I know it's been as strange as humanly possible, but you guys have, it's been nice that some people have shown up. So all good. If you're good, you may leave. Peace out, everybody.